They thought she was invisible, just another captive, chained, bruised, forgotten in an old warehouse. The men who held her laughed, convinced no one would ever find her. They didn't know a former Navy SEAL and his canine partner were already walking through the door. And when Jack Turner sees injustice, he doesn't call for help. He is the help. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Rain slashed against the waterfront district of Seattle, flooding the streets with reflections of neon and restless wind. Jack Turner moved through that wet night with the precision of someone who had lived too long in danger to ever forget how to breathe alongside it. 33 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, Jack carried a physical presence sharpened by years of Navy SEAL discipline. His gait remained steady and calculated, as though each step was measured against unseen threats. His short brown hair clung to his forehead beneath the rain, the faint scruff on his jaw giving him a hardened, rugged edge. A thin scar slicing through his eyebrow, earned during an explosion overseas, served as a silent reminder that pain had been both his teacher and his shadow. His gray eyes, cool and unreadable, scanned the environment automatically, the habit of someone who had learned that hesitation could kill. Beside him trotted Atlas, a 2-year-old German shepherd with a dense sable coat and intelligent amber eyes. Atlas had a powerful build, agile and precise, every muscle molded by training and instinct. He had once been a military K-9 assigned to Jack during a mission that ended in flames, loss, and screams trapped between collapsing walls. Atlas had lost partial hearing in one ear after a flash grenade detonated too close. Jack had lost 3 teammates. Since that day, neither man nor dog slept through the night without waking to ghosts. Tonight's mission wasn't heroic. Jack had arranged to buy discounted workout equipment from a guy who stored unused gear in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. For Jack, physical exertion was the closest replacement for battle, lifting weights and pushing limits to drown thoughts he couldn't tame. He needed the routine, the distraction. Something inside his mind had never left the war. Rain hammered the rusted roof of the warehouse as Jack reached it. The exterior walls were streaked with rust and graffiti, illuminated by a dying yellow bulb that flickered like a heartbeat losing strength. The sliding metal door groaned as Jack pulled it open. Inside, the darkness felt heavy. Musty air, damp wood, and machine oil mingled into a smell that clung to the lungs. Atlas paused at the entrance, ears perked, muscles coiled with alertness. Jack sensed it too, something wrong in the silence. The warehouse interior was cluttered with leaning weight racks, dusty cardboard boxes, and dented steel bars left in careless piles. Water dripped from holes in the ceiling into metal buckets placed beneath the leaks. Jack swept a slow, assessing gaze through the shadows. His instincts hummed. Atlas's nose twitched. The dog emitted a deep growl that vibrated through Jack's chest. Jack clicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through the dark and landed on what he expected: stacks of gym equipment and crates shoved against walls. But then the light brushed something else. A small shape, human, curled near the back wall. Jack stepped closer, forcing himself to breathe evenly. The flashlight revealed her fully. A woman was chained to a metal ring bolted into the wall. Her hair, dirty blonde, tangled with dust and dried tears, hung in clumped strands that stuck to her bruised face. Her dress was torn at the seams, fabric stained with mud and dried blood. Her skin was pale beneath purple and green bruises scattered along her arms, neck, and cheek. She was young, maybe mid-20s, thin, not by body type but by deprivation. Malnutrition had hollowed her cheeks. Her wrists were red and raw from struggling against the shackles. When her eyes opened, Jack froze. They were blue, but empty. Not hopeful, not afraid, just numb, as if she had already accepted that no one was coming. Atlas approached first, low to the ground, tail stiff, head lowered in the instinctive posture dogs use when approaching something fragile. Jack knelt beside her. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. She seemed unsure whether he was real. Jack didn't touch her. He understood what violation looked like. He had seen too much cruelty in back rooms of war. He studied her wrists, the bolt in the wall, the chain. Someone had done this intentionally. Someone had kept her here. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind them. Jack stood up in one fluid motion, body shifting like a blade being unsheathed. A thick-bodied man entered, mid-40s, with a greasy shirt clinging to his stomach and a patchy beard that didn't quite hide the smirk twisting on his lips. His cheeks were flushed, the complexion of a habitual drinker. His eyes were lazy, careless, the eyes of a man who had never been challenged. He started talking, rambling about how the girl was wild, how he found her, how she caused trouble. His words rolled out casually, as if the girl were a broken tool. Jack didn't react. He just listened, his jaw tight, gray eyes sharpening with every syllable. A memory hit him, the smell of smoke and metal in a collapsed building overseas. The moment he found hostages chained, terrified, and far too late to save. Atlas growled, a low warning sound. The man stepped closer, still smirking, as if Jack were just another buyer browsing merchandise. He moved to reach his belt. Jack struck first. One punch, precise and brutal, powered by the rage he never spoke aloud. The man dropped like a felled tree, collapsed on the wet floor. Atlas stood over him, teeth bared in silent threat. Jack turned back to the woman. Kneeling once more, he examined the bolt. Rusted, old, installed years ago. It wasn't random. This warehouse had seen other secrets. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his multi-tool, and worked on the chain. His hands slipped from rain and sweat, but he kept going. The woman watched him, not with gratitude, but disbelief. When the lock finally snapped, her body slumped forward, too weak to hold itself. Jack caught her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. Atlas pressed, close, guarding both of them. Holding her in his arms, Jack stood and carried her toward the exit. Rain roared outside, washing over them like a baptism. He didn't look back. In that moment, amid the storm, the cold, the suffocating smell of rust and old fear, Jack Turner knew with absolute certainty that his life had just split into two halves, before he found her and everything after. Jack Turner carried the woman up 3 flights of stairs to his apartment overlooking the harbor, his arms aching not from weight but from the realization of how fragile she felt. The corridor smelled faintly of salt water and old wood, the kind of scent that clings to buildings too close to the sea. His apartment was small and practical, clean but devoid of decoration, as if he lived in transit rather than belonging anywhere. A single couch, neatly folded blankets, a small kitchen with metal pans hanging like disciplined soldiers. The space reflected his life. No clutter, no softness, no room for chaos. Atlas immediately positioned himself at the front door, lying down with his head against his paws, his amber eyes fixed on the hallway like a sentry. Jack laid the woman gently on the couch. She didn't resist or speak. Her breathing was shallow, as though her ribs feared expansion. Jack removed his wet jacket, ran a towel over her shoulders, and draped a warm blanket across her body. Her skin was clammy, cold from shock rather than rain. His mind raced, but his hands were steady. He boiled water, prepared soup, and placed it near her, though she didn't reach for it. Jack kept a distance, not wanting to suffocate her with concern, but unable to step far enough away to ignore the tremor in her hands or the hollow look in her eyes. For years in the military, Jack had been trained to assess casualties, to stabilize trauma, to react when every second could cost a life. But this was different. War wounds healed or killed. This kind of wound lived inside people. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft breathing of Atlas and the hum of the old refrigerator. The woman seemed suspended in time, her eyes unfocused, lost somewhere inside herself. When Jack tried to speak, she flinched. It wasn't the words that frightened her. It was the world behind them. He stopped speaking. Instead, he offered small gestures. Water within reach, lights dimmed so shadows wouldn't loom too harshly, the sound of rain tapping against the windows to soften the heavy quiet of the room. Over the next days, Jack created a routine. Every morning he brewed coffee and warmed oatmeal. The television remained off, except for weather updates. Atlas roamed the apartment silently, occasionally nudging her foot with his snout, persuading her to acknowledge that the world still contained gentleness. Jack worked it out in the small corner of the living room, using makeshift weights. The woman watched him sometimes, her gaze drifting to the rhythm of his movements, as if seeing someone so controlled helped her body remember life beyond captivity. On the 3rd day, a new character entered the story, Mrs. Parker, Jack's elderly neighbor. She lived alone across the hall and was the unofficial watcher of the building. A petite 70-year-old with short silver curls and thick glasses, she had the sharp observational skills of someone who had raised 6 children and refused to be surprised by anything. Mrs. Parker knocked on the door with a container of homemade chicken broth balanced on her palm, wearing her signature wool cardigan full of mismatched buttons and floral embroidery. Her voice was warm but direct, the voice of a woman who believed kindness was a duty, not an act. She barely noticed Jack's towering frame or the scowl of exhaustion he carried. Instead, her eyes shifted toward the couch, where the woman lay wrapped in a blanket. Without prying, she left the soup and a note written in careful cursive. For strength. Everyone needs warmth. Then she left. Jack respected the simplicity, no judgment, just care. That night, the woman finally took a sip of soup. Atlas watched from the floor, tail thumping once. The shift was small, barely noticeable, but Jack felt it like a breath after drowning. On the fourth day, Jack found her standing near the window. She had wrapped herself in one of his hoodies, the sleeves hanging long past her hands. Her bruises were slowly changing colors, from violent purple to sickly yellow. She stood with her back straight, but her hands shook as she held the windowsill, staring down at the rain-soaked harbor, where boats rocked gently against wooden posts. Jack gave her space, observing quietly. He noticed details. She was slender in a way that suggested she had once been healthy, not fragile. Her hair, though tangled, fell in soft waves. Beneath the fading bruises, her skin was pale like winter light. She didn't look like broken things look. She looked like something forced into breaking. She didn't speak. Jack didn't force her to. On the fifth day, at dawn, Jack woke to the sound of movement. The woman sat at the kitchen counter, hair slightly brushed, wearing clothes he had set out. The light from the window carved a soft outline around her. She held a cup of tea with both hands, warming her fingers. Jack approached slowly, wary of startling her. Atlas sat between them, acting as a silent bridge. The woman inhaled deeply, her voice quiet and fragile, almost brittle from disuse. She finally spoke. "My name is Lena." Jack didn't respond with grand gestures. He nodded once, acknowledging the courage in those 3 words. Something inside the room shifted. The silence no longer suffocated. It breathed. Lena didn't speak again that day, but she began eating small meals, walking around the apartment, allowing Atlas to sit beside her. She still startled at sudden noises, especially footsteps in the hallway, but she didn't freeze. Jack watched her reclaim small pieces of herself. Not all at once, not dramatically, but piece by piece, breath by breath. By the end of the 5th day, Lena slept for the first time without waking from nightmares. Jack sat near the window, keeping watch. Atlas slept nearest the door, guarding the world outside. In that stillness, Jack realized something else. Rescuing her from the warehouse was only the beginning. The real battle, the one inside, her, had just started. And without speaking it aloud, Jack knew he would stay until she didn't need guard dogs or closed doors to feel safe. The rain had stopped, but Seattle was never truly dry. The air carried cold salt and the hum of ships docking and leaving, their horns echoing through the harbor like distant warnings. Jack Turner sat at the small kitchen table, cleaning a tactical folding knife with slow, absent movements. Atlas lay stretched across the apartment floor, body relaxed but eyes alert, his ears flicking toward any hallway creak. Lena sat near the window, wrapped in a sweater that wasn't hers, legs folded beneath her like a bird learning how to perch again. Her bruises were fading, replaced by a muted resolve that Jack had noticed each day since she spoke her name. Her posture had changed. She no longer curled into herself. She sat upright, watching, listening. The world still scared her, but she no longer accepted being invisible. Jack's phone buzzed once, an alert from the lobby camera he installed the first night she stayed here. He glanced at the screen. A man stood at the entrance of the building. Not a delivery driver, not a neighbor, a stranger, and strangers didn't come to this floor. The stranger pressed the buzzer repeatedly. Atlas rose in one smooth motion, hackles lifting down his spine, his body shifting from rest to silent threat. Jack muted the phone screen and watched. The man kept pushing the intercom, leaning in close to the camera as if he wanted to be seen. He was tall, mid-30s, wearing a black windbreaker that clung to broad shoulders. His beard was trimmed short, neat but heavy along the jawline. His hair, dark and slicked back, looked wet from mist more than rain. His eyes were sharp, alert, searching, eyes that assessed surroundings the same way Jack's did. His movements had precision, the kind that did not come from wandering but from purpose. A scar cut down from the edge of his lip to his chin, not fresh, but still angry and red, as though whatever caused it hadn't fully healed in his mind. This man knew violence. He didn't carry himself like a thug. He carried himself like someone used to giving orders. He pressed the buzzer again, then spoke, voice distorted through the old lobby speaker, but crisp enough for Jack to hear. I'm looking for someone. Blonde woman, mid-20s. The words sliced through the apartment. Lena jolted, her body going rigid, breathing shallow. A tremor rippled through her fingers. He's not supposed to be here, she whispered, barely audible. Jack moved toward the entry camera monitor. He watched as the man shifted his stance, scanning every window, every shadow outside. The way he positioned himself, back-angled toward a wall, vision open to multiple exits, told Jack exactly what he needed to know. Former military, or trained by someone who was. Lena stood frozen, like a small animal that had sensed a predator, her face paled, color draining until she resembled the ghost of the warehouse where he found her. Jack stepped closer, slow and controlled. Do you know him? Lena didn't answer immediately. Her voice shook when she finally spoke. He worked for the man who kept me. Jack felt something cold ignite behind his ribs. The man buzzed again, impatience creeping into his motions. Jack pressed the microphone button without letting Lena near the door. Wrong place, leave. The stranger stopped. He turned his head slightly, listening. I know she's there, he said. Not a question, a certainty. Atlas growled, a low, primal warning. Jack didn't open the door. Instead, he stepped back into the room, placing himself between Lena and the world. The stranger waited outside, silent for a moment, and as if deciding how far he was willing to push this. Then he walked away from the door, but did not leave the sidewalk. He leaned against a street lamp and lit a cigarette, eyes fixed on the entrance, watching, waiting. The scar on his lip twisted when he exhaled smoke into the night. For an hour, he remained. Lena paced restlessly, her breath shallow, her movements frantic. Jack was patient. He had spent years waiting for worse things in worse places. Atlas lay near the door, muscles taut, ready to spring. Eventually, the stranger flicked the cigarette onto the wet concrete, stepped into a black sedan, and drove off into the night. But Jack knew. Men like that never left empty-handed. Lena slid down to the floor near the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. Her voice trembled when she finally broke the silence. I didn't just escape from one man. There's a group. Organized. They don't let anyone leave, not alive. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. They kept women. They moved them across cities, sold them. I was a mistake. I ran when the warehouse caught fire last month. Jack absorbed everything, without a single visible reaction. Inside, something old and violent stirred. He remembered the hostage mission overseas. He remembered how failure tasted like gunpowder and regret. He wouldn't fail again. Lena kept talking, voice shaking. The man outside, his name is Mason Riker. She swallowed. He tracks people down. Mason Riker, a hunter, not a casual errand boy. Someone who enjoyed pursuit. Jack pictured his face, his stance, the calculating eyes. Men like Riker didn't wait for orders. They executed them. Jack realized something else. The moment Riker had stepped onto that sidewalk, this wasn't accidental anymore. This wasn't chaos. This was war. Jack stood and pulled open a storage trunk under his bed. Inside was a locked black case. He placed it on the kitchen table and opened it. A handgun rested inside. A Sig Sauer P6, standard military issue, well-maintained, cold and patient. Atlas watched, tail low, silent approval. Jack checked the magazine, loaded it with clean precision, and holstered the weapon. Lena stared, breath uneven. What are you doing? Jack locked the safety, his voice quiet, steady, preparing. She shook her head. You don't have to. Jack cut her off with a single look, sharp but controlled. You didn't choose this. His voice wasn't harsh, it was conviction. Lena's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but relief. No one had ever stood between her and danger before. No one had chosen to. Atlas nudged her hand with his nose, offering comfort no human language could. She touched his head, fingers trembling, but she didn't pull away. Jack stood near the window, watching the street below, empty, silent, temporary, because predators always return to what they believe they own. And Mason Riker believed Lena was unfinished business. Tonight was only the beginning. Jack Turner woke before sunrise, as he always did. Years in the SEALs had wired his internal clock to snap awake while the world was still half asleep. The apartment was dim, bathed in soft blue from the harbor lights outside. Atlas stretched beside the door, tail sweeping once across the floor when Jack sat up. Lena slept on the couch, curled beneath a blanket, her face turned toward the backrest as though instinctively avoiding open space. Since Mason Riker's visit, Jack's apartment had quietly shifted from a place of refuge into a forward operating base. Every object had purpose now. Every movement, every breath was strategy. Jack began modifying the space. He replaced the screws on the door hinges with longer industrial bolts, reinforced the lock, and slid a metal bar across the door frame like a barricade. He moved furniture, clearing space so nothing blocked movement or sight lines. The kitchen table became a station for equipment, flashlights, spare batteries, a first aid kit. The bedroom closet became a small armory. On the highest shelf, locked in a case, rested the Sig Sauer. Atlas shadowed Jack's every step, head tilted as though analyzing and approving each change, his amber eyes bright with focus. Lena stirred awake around mid-morning. She looked stronger without realizing it. Her cheeks still carried shadows beneath the skin, but her posture was different, less collapsed, more aligned with her spine. Her blonde hair, brushed now, fell in uneven waves around her shoulders. She blinked against the morning light, uncertain, as if waking in a life she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. Jack handed her a warm mug of herbal tea, the steam rising between them like a fragile truce. He didn't waste time. Training begins today. She didn't flinch, she didn't argue, she only nodded, jaw tightening with resolve. Jack began with breathing. Control breath, control fear. Lena sat cross-legged on the living room rug, hands resting on her knees, eyes closed. Atlas laid his head on her foot, grounding her as she inhaled and exhaled through counts Jack timed. She shook at first. Trauma roars loudest in stillness. Jack could see the war inside her, the instinct to run, the ache to disappear. But slowly, the tremor eased. Her shoulders dropped. Her breathing found rhythm. Next came body mechanics. Jack guided her stance, correcting her center of gravity with gentle touches to her elbow or back. He never touched without announcing movement. He never stepped too close. Respect was part of the training, and Lena felt it. Her body responded to direction, but what mattered more was that she was learning she had a body again, one that obeyed her commands, not someone else's. Knife training came next. A wooden practice knife first, then a dull aluminum one. Jack showed her how to keep her weight on the balls of her feet, not her heels. He moved around her, slow and controlled. Lena mirrored him. Atlas watched like a referee, ears flicking each time Lena shifted position. Lena's grip on the knife tightened. For a moment, her face changed, hardening, sharpening. She wasn't frozen prey anymore. She was a creature that could bite. Jack nodded. Good. She kept practicing, repeating motions until sweat gathered at her hairline. She didn't stop, didn't complain, didn't waver. Jack saw something forming under the bruises and fear. A quiet fire. Later, Jack introduced firearms. He opened the black case and removed the Sig Sauer, placing it safely on the counter. Lena's body stiffened. The warehouse wasn't just a memory to her. She still carried the metallic taste of terror in her mouth. Jack didn't hand her the weapon right away. Instead, he disassembled it piece by piece, labeling each part, explaining its purpose, to remove the mystery, to remove the power it held over her mind. You control the weapon, Jack said. It doesn't control you. Lena swallowed, then repeated his motions, hands unsure at first, then slow but precise. She learned how to load a magazine, how to lock the slide back, how to stand with her feet aligned, shoulders relaxed, arms extended without locking elbows. Her breathing steadied as she gripped the weapon, and for the first time, Jack saw anger, not fear, flash in her eyes. Atlas barked once as if congratulating her. By mid-afternoon, Jack knew they needed to test her responses to surprise stimuli. He stepped to the stereo on the shelf and turned it on. The sudden sound of drums and distorted guitars filled the room. The music wasn't random, it was noise, chaos, unpredictability, designed to push her adrenaline. Lena didn't break, she braced herself. At that moment, Mrs. Parker knocked on the door again, holding a paper grocery bag and wearing her oversized red raincoat patterned with daisies. Her white curls framed her face, and she peered through her thick glasses like she was seeing danger long before it arrived. She handed the bag to Jack, fresh vegetables and a handwritten note, for strength and grounding. She smiled at Lena without pity, only encouragement. Then she turned and walked away, her soft-soled shoes making quiet thumps down the hallway. Her presence was small but grounding, an anchor in a storm. Once the door closed, Jack continued. Lena practiced drawing the weapon from the holster Jack strapped around her waist. She practiced pivoting around corners, slicing room angles with her eyes first, body second. They ran drills through the apartment, using cupboards as cover and furniture as obstacles. Hours blurred into muscle memory. Eventually, Jack pulled out a training dummy made of rolled towels and duct tape. He tied it to a pillar and instructed her to strike it. Lena hesitated, breathing shallow. Jack didn't push. He simply nodded once, proud but silent. She raised the knife. Her movements were stiff at first, then fluid, then violent. Months of terror poured into each strike. At one point, she stopped, chest heaving, eyes wet. But she didn't step back. She attacked again. Atlas barked once, sharp, as if announcing the moment she crossed some invisible threshold. By the time evening dimmed the harbor light, Lena stood sweaty but proud, clutching the training knife loosely. She met Jack's eyes, not as a victim seeking rescue, but as someone reclaiming herself. And Jack saw it clearly. Lena was no longer learning to defend herself. She was preparing for war. The storm rolled in without warning, thick clouds pressing low above the harbor like a fist ready to strike. Wind rattled the windows of Jack Turner's apartment, rain slashing sideways against the glass. Everything inside the room was silent, except for the soft scrape of Atlas's claws as the German shepherd paced, sensing what was coming long before humans could. Jack stood near the entrance, one hand resting lightly on the metal reinforcement bar across the door, his chest rising and falling in calm, controlled breaths. He wore a fitted dark shirt and tactical pants, the fit displaying the strength and steadiness built from years in the Navy SEALs. His jaw was set, expression sharp as carved steel. Lena stood a few feet away, wearing Jack's old black hoodie and fitted cargo pants. The bruises on her face had faded into pale shadows, but her eyes held something entirely new: focus. She secured the holster around her hip with steady hands. Atlas nudged her leg lightly, his amber eyes lifted toward her face, silently asking if she was ready. Lena nodded. For the first time, the gesture wasn't fear, it was confirmation. Jack checked the traps they had set, thin lines of transparent filament connected to small metal clips and bells, a modified version of field alarms he once used overseas. Next to the living room couch, the window had been reinforced with wooden panels, placed so subtly no one passing by would notice. The layout of the apartment had become a blueprint of defense. Every step, every corner, calculated. Jack looked at Lena. Remember, breathing controls the shot. She inhaled slowly, chest steady, eyes narrowing, not with panic, but with determination. Outside, a sudden flash of headlights swept across the building. Atlas stopped pacing and stood rigid, tail stiff, body leaning forward, ears locked on the sound downstairs. An engine shut off. Car doors closed. Voices murmured. 2, maybe 3. Then footsteps entered the building. Heavy, impatient. Jack checked the peephole in silence. The hallway lights flickered. The building's old wiring struggled against the storm. A tall man approached, moving with a predator's stride. Not Mason Riker, someone else. He was large, broad shoulders stretching a military-style rain jacket, water dripping from its canvas surface. His face was rough and angular, jaw covered in short black stubble. A long scar crossed his cheek diagonally, a thick, raised, pale stripe that distorted the skin. He had the presence of someone who had fought many men and regretted none of them. In his gloved hands, he carried a metal crowbar. Behind him followed a second man, shorter, stockier, with a shaved head and a twitch beneath his left eye. His clothes were too clean, his boots polished, someone who preferred to command from behind rather than dirty his hands. The shorter man carried a sleek black weapon case. His name, as Lena would reveal later, was Ethan Cole, a logistics coordinator within the trafficking network. Smart, precise, cold. The tall man with the scar was Troy Donovan, the muscle, known for breaking ribs and spirits with equal indifference. Jack didn't need introductions. Men like these carried violence like a second skin. Without speaking, Jack stepped back, raised 2 fingers, a silent signal. Atlas moved into position behind the overturned coffee table, the low barricade intentionally placed earlier. Lena slipped behind the corner near the kitchen, hands gripping her pistol. Her breathing stayed steady. She had practiced for this, lived for this. Outside, the first blow struck the door, the metal booming through the apartment. The second blow loosened the lock. The third blow broke it completely. The door swung open. Troy entered first. He took 3 steps, then stopped. His boot had hooked one of the thin tripwires. Jack pulled Lena behind cover as Troy looked down too late. A small metal canister dropped from the shelf above and burst, flooding his face with fine white powder, not lethal, but blinding. He roared, dropping the crowbar, clutching his face. Before he could recover, Atlas lunged. The German Shepherd collided with Troy's chest, forcing him against the wall. Teeth clamped onto the thick fabric of his jacket, dragging him down. Troy screamed, more angry than afraid. Ethan raised a gun, but Jack shot first. Not to kill, but precise enough to make him drop his weapon. The bullet struck the doorframe beside Ethan's hand, splintering wood. Ethan flinched, losing grip of the gun. Lena moved. She emerged from cover, aimed with both hands, feet grounded, stance solid. She fired. The bullet struck the metal case Ethan held. It clattered to the floor. Ethan snarled, reaching for the dropped gun. He was too slow. A second tripwire tightened around his ankle and yanked him sideways. Jack had attached it to a heavy storage trunk, which toppled off the dresser and slammed into Ethan's ribs. The sound was deep, final. Ethan collapsed. Lena stepped toward him slowly, gun still raised. Troy, partially blinded, staggered to his feet. Atlas barked, circling, keeping him off balance. Jack moved in, grabbing Troy's arm and twisting. The crowbar clanged to the ground. Troy swung wildly with his other fist, but Jack ducked and slammed him into the wall, forearm pressed hard against his throat, cutting off air. Troy gasped, the powder still burning his eyes. "Where's Mason Riker?" Jack demanded. Troy choked, spit mingling with rainwater on the floor. "You can't stop him." Jack tightened his grip. Lena approached, standing beside Jack. She was not trembling. She was calm, controlled. She knelt, grabbed Troy's collar, and forced him to look at her through his burning eyes. "You won't hurt anyone ever again." The man's defiance cracked then. On Lena's face, he finally saw the one thing he feared: power. Jack struck him once. Troy collapsed. Ethan lay unconscious near the kitchen. Jack checked. Pulses. Both alive but disarmed and incapacitated. The rain outside softened. Thunder rolled away from the city, as if the storm itself had decided it was done watching. Dawn crept slowly through the kitchen window, pale pink light bleeding into the room. Lena stood at the center of the apartment, chest rising and falling, the weapon now lowered at her side. She looked toward the shattered door, toward the world beyond it. She didn't look afraid, not anymore. Atlas walked to her, leaning gently against her leg, his warm presence anchoring her. Lena placed her hand on his head, fingers threading through his fur. Jack watched her, not the frightened woman from the warehouse, not the quiet shadow surviving inside his apartment. She stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes steady. She had crossed the line between fear and ownership of her life. From this moment, she was no longer hunted. She chose her future. In the end, this story is not just about survival. It is about the moment when light breaks through the darkest corner of a life. Sometimes God sends miracles not as thunder and lightning, but as ordinary people who show up when we are at our weakest, who remind us that we are seen, valued, and loved. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes from small steps, quiet courage, and the belief that we are not alone. In our everyday lives, we each have a chance to be that miracle for someone else, whether through kindness, a helping hand, or simply refusing to look away when someone is hurting. If this story touched you, please share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue spreading messages of hope, courage, and redemption. May God bless you, protect your home, guide your steps, and place angels on your path, just as He did for them.